moderator.
Okay, so can I go ahead, Matt, or do I have to wait for community TV?
Tim will give us
Okay,
the
you're
all
live
clear.
on 25.
Okay, all right, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the June 16th meeting of the Wolfeboro Planning Board. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the planning board, and due to the COVID-19 crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneous to this meeting, authorized pursuant to Governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the GoToMeeting platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the GoToMeeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-646-749-3122, followed by the audio access code 918-242-429, or by video following the directions on the Town of Wolfeboro website posted on the homepage under the virtual town meeting login information page. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting using GoToMeeting, and instructions are provided on the Town of Wolfeboro website at wolfeboronh.us on the virtual town meeting login information page. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem accessing the information via phone or computer, please immediately call 603-391-8489 or email planningdirector@wolfeboronh.us. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. E, meeting notes. Members of the board will be unmuted for the entirety of the meeting. Members of the public will be muted for the meeting with the exception of public comment portions or public hearings. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, and that is required under the right to know law. But before I do the roll call, let me welcome Julie Jacobs. Welcome, Julie, as our new alternate. And let's see, she will be sitting in John Thurston's place this evening. Okay, roll call vote. Von Dugan? Here. Brad Harriman?
I'm here, and there's nobody in the room with me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mike Hodder?
Present, and no one's in the room with me.
And Peter Goodwin?
I'm here and there's no one in the room with me.
Let's see, Susan Replier. I don't see Susan. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see.
You?
Well, yes, me. And Julie, are you present? And is anyone in the room with you?
I'm here and I'm alone in the room.
Okay, and Matt Sullivan is with us. And are you going to introduce Mary Jane?
I'd love to. Thanks, Kathy. I just want to introduce everyone to Mary Jane Shelton, who you should see on your screen somewhere. For me, she's in the bottom middle. Mary Jane is going to be joining us to replace Kathy LaPierre as the recording assistant, not only for the planning board, but also for the zoning board and for some portion of the Conservation Commission. Mary Jane is actually currently an employee for Walker and Varney, but is more than willing to come on board to help us out with the recording tasks. And I think she's going to be a great asset to the board. She's going to start tonight, and I don't want her to be too intimidated by what the task is at hand, but I'm fully confident she'll be able to do it. And we're going to have her actually work with Leanne a little bit to help get her on board and get the formatting down. And I think if Kathy's minutes of old are any indication, Leanne does a great job training new people who come on board. So I'm really pleased and confident that Mary Jane will take over. And Mary Jane, I don't know if you wanted to say hello to everyone on the board. I'm not sure who you know, but it'd be great if we could just have a quick intro.
Well, Mary Jane and I are neighbors, so we know each other. Know any of these other folks? Peter Goodwin, Brad Harriman is on the Board of Selectmen. Mike Cotter is the vice chairman, and Von Dugan.
Perfect. And I think, Mary Jane, I think your microphone might be muted for some reason. I'm not sure what exactly is going on, but oh, maybe you're good.
Okay. Thank you. Look forward to working with you, and it's nice to meet everyone.
Good.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So
Welcome.
we will go onward, and I'll turn this over to Mike Cotter.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This past weekend saw the graduation ceremony, such as it was, scattered throughout the town for the 2020 class of graduates from Kingswood Regional High School. And I thought the planning board might wish to acknowledge their accomplishment of having gotten through the school year under remarkably difficult circumstances. So I have a motion to propose, which I'll read.
Okay.
Mary Jane, I will email this to Matt since it's a little bit long. So you'll then have don't have to worry about taking this down verbatim. The motion reads as follows, quote, "The planning board acknowledges the extraordinarily difficult circumstances under which the 2019-2020 school year ended, and therefore wishes to extend our sincerest congratulations to the Kingswood Regional High School senior class of 2020 on their graduation, and our best wishes for the graduates as they embark on their new adventure." End quote. That's the motion.
Thank you, and I'll second that motion. That's okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, then motion's been made and seconded. I'll do a roll call. Von Dugan,
Aye.
Brad Harriman,
Absolutely, yes.
Mike Cotter,
Aye.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Julie Jacobs,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnett. I vote yes. Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you,
Okay.
board.
The next item is a continued hearing from June 2nd, and I'd like to appoint Julie to sit on this as a voting member. She has all of the past information about this case, and in an earlier discussion today, she said that she has reviewed it. So she is up to speed. This is, as I said, a continued hearing from June 2nd. This is the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum, 61 Railroad Avenue, tax map and lot 217-46, case 2020-15. This is a site plan review and for a museum use. This was continued for a couple of reasons, and I guess, Randy, you're here, but the ZBA did approve a special exception. It met the criteria for a special exception. So we have that information in our file, and also an issue that had been brought to our attention by the Bean family. They had some concerns, but they have sent a note to us saying that they have met at the site and are comfortable with the project and in favor of it, or support the project. So Randy, I'll turn it over to you and Mr. Sims.
Yes, Randy Tatro for the applicant / owner. John Sims, representing the museum, is also available tonight. And as Kathy stated, there were 2 ZBA meetings that were held, sandwiched around the last planning board meeting that we attended 2 weeks ago, which was continued to tonight. And again, since then, the use variance was granted for the museum use for the property. The ZBA had a variety of questions that centered a bit around code issues and some site review issues that we feel we have sufficiently addressed, and I'll go over them. I guess, Kathy, I paraphrased the narrative last time. I don't know if you think I need to do that again, or if I can move on to the issues that were raised and addressed.
Right, as planning board members, are you comfortable with Randy moving on with the new information? Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Okay, and you can ask any questions when I'm babbling along if you don't.
Okay.
But generally, after the last planning board meeting, initially we went to the ZBA. The ZBA continued it and wanted to hear some planning board input, which we did 2 weeks ago. Some of the concerns on both boards centered around public safety, access, ADA access, obviously the abutter concern with Mr. Bean, and generally some code issues that related to the ADA access and building capacity, fire code compliance, and so forth. Since then, we had a group meeting on the site that addressed some of these concerns. I feel most of these concerns, but that'll be up to the board. But they centered around 3 major items, and I submitted a letter to Matt that kind of paraphrased that. But the first one was a proposed edge of pavement that was very close to a originally proposed set of steps accessing the building along with the ADA ramp that were reconfigured. They were removed, and the handicap ramp was reconfigured, pushed back towards the property line, towards the Bridge Falls path, to allow for a better safety room around the building. The existing roadway, Railroad Ave, the easement in the town-owned property, has been conceptually planned out by Underwood Engineering. We reviewed that with Mr. Ford so that we could get a good idea where the proposed edge of pavement was going to be around the building and what was safe in that regard and what was the proper distance we wanted to keep from the drip edge on the roadside of the building for drainage purposes. So the plans that you have in front of you show those changes. The second thing centered around handicap access and ADA compliance to that. And given the situation's parameters with the LTIP funding and so forth, the only place we could locate the handicap accessible parking space was on the east end of the building. And so to get access to the end of the ADA ramp, we had to figure out a better way than going down the existing roadway. Originally, there was a sidewalk being planned by, the town's improvements with Underwood Engineering. That got nixed for various reasons. And so what we did was we met on site and everybody came up with a plan to be able, since it's so flat out there, we're able to do it, which was to take from the drop-off point to the ADA access ramp and provide a walkway up to Bridge Falls Path, along Bridge Falls Path, which is ADA access down to the existing entrance ramp to museum building. There were questions regarding whether or not you could access the building by just the ramp or whether you needed egress steps. These questions were brought up by the ZBA and I believe were answered by the consultant Bergeron Technical as far as code compliance. It was also run by Tom Zotti and the fire department regarding compliance to those issues. The handicap access ends up being about 150 to 180 feet long from the parking space, which is in compliance with the ADA. It's as close as you can get to it. We put notes on there about directional signage so that we could try to direct people, ADA people, towards the Bridge Falls path instead of down the roadway, obviously for safety reasons. The ramp was pushed again back towards the Bridge Falls path to allow with some better distance from the edge of traveled way of the existing Railroad Avenue roadway. If I've missed anything, John or Matt, please feel free to step in. But that was generally the concerns that were voiced along the regulatory pathway.
Okay, John, did you have anything you wanted to add right now before I go to Matt?
The additional barrier between the roadway and the exit from the ramp will be some landscaping to make it even more difficult for people to go directly on the roadway. So the idea then is to really make it very easy to go towards Bridge Falls Path and quite difficult to get onto the road. People will, but they will be alerted that this is not an easy thing to do. Other than that, I'm ready to talk about any of the issues that you wish to raise, but I think that Randy covered the changes well.
Okay, Matt, why don't you go ahead and we're going to comment on information we had from our attorney, right?
Yeah, I just want to quickly comment on a few things that Randy mentioned as well.
Okay.
Start actually with the notice of decision from the ZBA, and I want to reiterate the fact that the ZBA did have substantial concerns about code compliance related to a few different items: sprinklering, occupant load, the egress to the internal space. And because of the meeting that we had with Bergeron Technical Assistant Services, the consultant for the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum, I feel the letter that's been presented within the board's packet addresses all of those concerns. But I would point out that obviously, and in accordance with Condition 9 for the ZBA, the proposed use will be required to be building and life safety code compliant at such time that a building permit is filed. So that's a critical issue to identify. I did seek attorney and legal guidance on the matter of authorization from the board's land use attorney, Laura Spector Morgan from Municipal Group. I believe the legal opinion within your packet speaks for itself, but her feeling was that the applicant was duly authorized by the owner of the property. I just want to point out that one thing that's not reflected in the letter is that I had her view several primary source documents, including the minutes, or rather the tape of the meeting itself, all the documents and the minutes associated with the board's authorization of the Lakes Regional Model Railroad Museum to submit these applications. And her finding was as presented in the document in front of you this evening. And she felt the proper authorization was supplied. But just to clarify, obviously the board already voted to accept this application as complete. So that matter, in my opinion, has been addressed, but I just wanted to cleanse the record by having that legal opinion that affirms it in here. We did have a very productive meeting between the Public Works Director, myself, Jim Bean, John Sims, Randy Tatro, to address a lot of the site design issues related to the integration between the Railroad Ave layout project and this project. One of the things that you'll notice is that even in the revised proposed site layout plan, there are components of this that will be required to be taken on by the town, including some of the stone dust or paved access walk work that's proposed to complete the ADA work. As a result, I've maintained the proposed condition of approval if the board chooses to move forward this evening. a requirement that the CO shall be conditioned upon the final layout of Railroad Ave, because I feel that's critical to ensure that all of those pedestrian improvements and safety improvements have been put into place. Aside from that, I'm happy to answer any other questions. Not sure, I apologize that the ZBA minutes were not available for the board packets. We just weren't able to turn them around in short enough order to get them into your packets last week. But I think that the notice of decision does speak for itself, hopefully. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions that the board might have.
Okay, thank you. Board members, let me see if there's any member of the public that wants to comment, and then we'll go to your questions and comments. Is there any member of the public that wants to make comments during this application? Okay, planning board members.
Hello, Kathy.
Okay. All right.
Kathy?
Yes,
Kathy?
yes, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, Suzanne Ryan. Suzanne
Okay.
Ryan.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of the literature that you have isn't clear to me, so I'm going to just ask a couple questions.
Okay.
Has there been any findings made somewhere along the line about fire exit?
Randy,
Suzanne,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, Matt can take it. There was a letter, an email from Tom Zombie that addressed that, I believe.
Yeah, Suzanne, can I actually answer all your questions at once after you get them to us? I just want to write them
okay.
down. I'll give you an answer to all of them as we go here.
Okay, why don't you go ahead?
The fire exit, being that there's one entrance in and that same entrance is for the exit. I don't know, does the planning board have any jurisdiction over the interior? I see your head shaking no.
Only to the extent that it has some control on the parking requirements or something of that nature. But the planning board does not have authority to determine whether the interior of the space is ADA compliant or whether there are building code or fire code issues inside. Does that answer your question,
Okay.
Suzanne?
Yes, thank you, it does.
Okay.
And then the second question would be, it's more of a comment that was raised to me after the hearings. And that was for aesthetics, historical purposes, it was suggested to me that I ask, can the ramp go on the backside where the ADA parking is? Thus, the coming in from downtown past the railroad station building, you would not see that 100 feet of long ADA ramp, which take from the historic look of shed. So, and that it would make more logical sense to put the ramp back there with the parking space and have the fire exit there. So combine all that together in one spot. That's it.
Oh, okay, thank you, Suzanne. Who wants to address that issue? I know there was discussion about that. Randy?
There was quite a bit of discussion, and this is probably John's forte as far as why that matters with the L-chip funding and so forth and the integrity of the building.
We looked at that question many times and came up with a number of designs that are different from the one we have ended up with. Putting the same sort of folded ramp at the other end of the building and creating an entrance at that end of the building changes the nature and functionality of the building too far for L-chip to consider it to be a strict rehabilitation of the original building. It also, that entrance at that building would take away a substantial chunk of the substantial piece of the railroad layouts inside, and it would reduce them down to essentially much less interesting. But the fundamental problem with entrance at the other end was that it changes the nature and functionality of the building too far for L-chip to withstand. We also looked at a ramp at that end of the building, the north end of the building, that ended on the loading dock that runs along the east side of the building, and having people travel along that and enter the present entrance. That would require a 30 or 36-inch high fence along the edge of the loading dock with a palisade along the way, and it would change the nature and appearance and functionality of the building too great for LCHIP to withstand. We also looked at putting a handicap ramp within the loading dock to have it sort of in the center of the loading dock and have it rise through the length of the loading dock. But that turned out to be too expensive for the private funders to, and it also removed the loading dock for any future use in the event that we eventually do bring in a passenger wagon. But so we have looked at them all.
In the event you bring in a what?
A passenger car. That's another issue. That's for another generation, Madam Chairman. That's not for us to talk about. That is
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, planning board members, questions?
Madam Chair,
Kathy?
Oh,
can I
yes.
address the first question? Sorry.
Yeah, yes, go ahead. And then Suzanne, hang on just for a second. Go ahead, Matt.
I just wanted to note that the board members, if you want to follow along, on the bottom of page 1 and onto page 2, Bergeron Technical Services does address the need for secondary egress. That was one of the critical issues that was raised at the ZBA, which I think that was probably the concern that I was most worried about after that meeting. But you'll see that the Life Safety Code 2015 edition says that a single exit shall be permitted for a room with a total occupant load of less than 100 persons. And if you flip back to the first page, the total occupant for this structure as found under the occupant load section is 34 occupants. So it certainly falls below that 100-person threshold that would trigger two means of egress. Further, under the 2015 International Building Code section, it's referenced in the middle of page 2, 2 exits or exit access doorways from any space shall be provided when the design occupant load or common path of egress distance exceeds the values listed in the tables. And as the memo finds, this proposed project does not trigger the 2 exit access doorways or because of the occupant load and the traveled way. So in my opinion, and based on Bergeron's opinion, there was no need to have 2 independent means of egress, even in the form of a stairway and a ramp.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Suzanne, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess the information, the information that Matt has, and that's per some code, I don't know what code that was, seems to answer the question. However, it just doesn't sound logical. That building long and narrow, and you get the 34 people up at one end of the building. I don't know. It just seems as though that LCHIP is driving this rather than safety. Thank you. That's it for me.
Oh, okay, thank you, Suzanne. Okay, planning board members, questions, comments, thoughts?
I do have one question.
Okay,
I'm really late to the party. My question is the snow removal that we're going to have going from the handicap spot over to the Bridge Falls path up to the ramp. How is that going to happen?
I'll refer to Matt for the answer to that question.
Great question, Jewel. Great. Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So, well, we did have some of these discussions. So as much as it seems like I'm representing the applicant, I partially am as sort of the town's representative on the project.
okay.
There were substantial discussions about snow removal, less so on the proposed pathways, but more so on the Bridge Falls path itself, particularly when in recent years that has been used for snowmobile traffic when the path has been formed to the downtown area. obviously the use of the Bridge Falls Path for snowmobiles is a contentious issue on an annual basis, so we're not even sure that that will continue. But in the event that it does, we reviewed the ability to shift the trail over off of the path, giving it another sort of another path to the downtown, which would allow our snow crews to actually push the snow off of the Bridge Falls Path, even if it is stone dust. But I would add, and I didn't want to get into the specifics of this, but we are contemplating potentially a paved upgrade to the Bridge Falls Path, but we have not discussed that with the Board of Selectmen, so it hasn't been approved. It's not required by the site plan review regulations or by ADA, but I think ideally for snow removal purposes, Julie, we would pave both the pathways and the section of the Bridge Falls Path that these pathways intersect with, making it really easy to salt and really easy to keep clear and really as safe as possible. But one other thing that I do want to add, and John, you may want to speak to this, is that the museum is not going to be open in the winter season for its full use. It will be open as needed for events and for folks to work in the workshop, I think. But my understanding is that it will not be open to the same level that it will be during the summer season. John, I hope that I have that correct.
Yes, you do. We're not sure exactly what the public demand will be, but we certainly think that the primary demand for general public access will be in the summer and fall months. We like the museum will be accessible year-round, but during the winter, except perhaps for some special events around the holidays, we expect the museum to be attended by school groups, church groups, youth groups, and by the hobbyists themselves who will be working on the museum. The work on the museum will continue year-round because the layouts never stop evolving. But the general public, the paying public, will not be coming in during certainly the late winter months. But we'll see what the demand is and respond to it. But we don't think it'll be open generally for in the winter.
Okay, so Matt, are you saying that the town crews will be doing the snow removal? Is that what you said for the facility?
Kathy, I don't think that I can commit to that at this time because I know that the lease is currently under negotiation with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
I think that there will likely be some element of town.
Okay, you're breaking up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you
We've
have,
lost
yeah. Matt, you're not coming through.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes,
a little better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
yes.
All right, thank you. Of course, I said this would be an issue, and of course it was. So I think that the town crew will play a role in some level of snow removal, but I do not know whether they will be removing all of the snow or the snow on the Bridge Falls Path only. We have not negotiated all of those terms, and that's currently being done at the Board of Selectmen level, so I hesitate to answer that question in finality.
Oh, okay, and I think I asked this question at TRC or someplace about the paving of the Bridge Falls Path. I mean, is that can we just do that, or just do that? Is there some provision in information about the Bridge Falls Path that it shouldn't be paved?
I see Julie shaking her head. I'm not aware of that specific restriction. It may exist. We haven't looked into that in detail because it's not something we're proposing as a result of this proposed plan. But Julie, I'm not sure if you know more or.
Oh, actually,
I was thinking
it
it's still
is
might be
because-
tied in with the Rotary. Is it still tied in with the Rotary somehow? Or does the town own it completely now?
well, I don't know that it seems as if the town owns it if we're now going to plow it and talking about paving it. It's just a question that really, in my mind, it's kind of unclear and probably needs to be dealt with. The other issue that I'm concerned about is the parking spaces
Yes,
are on the site. Those are public parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the public parking spaces, Kathy, and they will be extended per the Underwood plan, you know, to the other side of the treat area that we show on our plan. And we did show snow storage on the Bridge Falls Path side of the parking spaces, but we didn't get into or address what Matt just did about how that would be taken care of in the winter months and along Bridge Falls Path. There was discussion out there between Dave and the rest of the people about whether or not they were allowed to pave that section between the two walkways of Bridge Falls Path, and they felt that they could, but they were going to check into that to make sure that that was a viable option. Obviously, the town owns the property. I don't know if there's other interest with the pathway group or something that would come into effect. Maybe John knows something about that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, clearly the museum will be clearing the snow off the ramp. That's part of the building. And the proposed lease is to lease the building, not the lot. The lot belongs to the town. And so the proposal would be for the museum to lease the building, and the town would continue to maintain the rest of the unimproved area of the lot. And so they would continue to mow and do what they now do on that little piece of Bean Park and the town-owned section. Whether the town would clear the snow off the small section of path that is on the Bean property is really, I don't think, a major issue. I mean, it will take, it's only what, about a 10, 12-foot section, and that's no problem to shovel off. Whether the Bridge Force path is paved or not, it still can be plowed. Clearly plowing on a dirt track is not as good as plowing on paved, but it will be cleared, but it will not be used generally by the public when there is snow on the ground.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks, John. The other issues that I have is this car addition. It keeps coming up. Matt tells me it is not part of the application. I clearly see that. But my concern is that if it's really being thought about in some planning for the future, it actually goes off. It looks to me like it may go off subject property and onto another property. And that's going to be a whole different issue we're going to be dealing with. And I hope everybody's very clear that part of this approval.
And beyond that, it's not a part of the ZBA's approval either. So it would clearly.
Okay, well, it does keep coming up. So I just feels I need to say that. Sorry, but.
Kathy, you broke up. You were saying what it was. Could you repeat what your concern is?
What you're calling the car addition, that you are talking about possibly bringing in the future.
Oh, I should not talk about that at all, because that's for people who are going to be 20 years from now, or maybe 10 years from now. It won't be part of anything I'll be involved with, or that you guys will be involved with. It's just something that's from a far distance that I would like to not inhibit or prevent. Because the concept is a very attractive concept, but we haven't even thought through the consequences. And you're right, the rails would be on the Bridge Falls Path property. It's a complicated issue, and I don't even want you to think about it.
Okay,
Sorry,
all right. Okay, any other issues? Planning board members?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
I did not derive any comfort from Attorney Laura Spector Morgan's opinion regarding the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum's standing to apply for site plan review for this project. She makes the point that the applicant, represented by Mr. Sims, has authorization from the owner of the property to present the application on its behalf. but I note that the owner of the property is not the Board of Selectmen. The owner of the property is the town of Wolfeboro and the people who live here. Approval of a site plan review application ordinarily results in new construction or renovation of an existing construction. Therefore, the only lawful applicant, in my opinion, for site plan review is the property owner, him or herself. In this case, the town is the lawful applicant, or should be the lawful applicant. The Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum has no legal relationship with the town other than an agency appointment, the beneficiary of a lease whose terms are yet to be settled, and a capital reserve fund whose agents to expend are currently the selectmen. I find no standing here for the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum to apply to this board for site plan review approval. On that basis alone, I will not vote for this application to approve it. But in addition, coming out of the discussion this evening, I note that we have unresolved issues that the board has not gotten clear answers to. Snow storage, exactly how that's going to get resolved has not been settled. The access ramp for the ADA accessibility is a very clumsy solution to a problem. The relationship to Railroad Avenue is still unsettled. The town has plans for the area. We had a charrette planned. How this project fits into that planning is unsettled. The parking arrangements, from what I could hear, don't appear to be smoothly settled either. And the possible plowing of Bridge Falls Path really makes me shudder to think about. So I have basic constructive objections to this application, but I also have very simple practical objections to this application. So for those reasons, all of them, I will not vote for this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, board members?
My comment would be a milder version of Michael's, and that would be that we have to itemize those items like code compliance, snow removal agreement, and the lease terms being settled with the town as conditions or some such before we could approve this.
Okay. How do the rest of you want to proceed? Need some guidance
Yeah, Madam
here.
Chair.
A motion, yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, couple comments. I think I agree. I think we definitely would need to spell out, if we do approve this, any and all conditions as we usually do. The ZBA obviously has one very important one that I think we should definitely have also, which relates to the layout of Railroad Avenue by the town. That has to happen for this to move forward. I think that's very important.
Right.
And obviously tonight's the first time I've heard about anything with the snow removal coming back and along Bridge Falls Path. That's obviously something that would have to be presented to the Board of Selectmen to address and have input on and make a decision on that. So I think those would be all contingencies we could put on there as conditions if we do go that route.
And there do seem to be some unresolved issues, whether they can go on as conditions, I think is what we need to grapple to.
May I address the lease?
Sure.
The negotiations over a lease are suspended because the lease covers the post-construction relationship between the tenant and the landlord. It has been largely worked out, but it has been set aside in favor of a construction agreement, which is currently being negotiated. The town has proposed language. We are reviewing that language, and we hope to respond with our comments on that construction agreement. So there are two agreements in question. The first is the construction agreement that will govern from now until the certificate of occupancy is issued. The lease will become effective when the certificate of occupancy is issued, and that will govern the future. So it is the construction agreement, which is a pretty standard agreement, that is being negotiated currently. And I think that will be resolved fairly quickly.
Okay, is there a reason, I mean, I don't really, I'm not trying to hold things up, but it seems like we should have the lease agreement so that, I mean, we don't know what's going to be in the lease agreement that then could affect the site itself. So Matt, can you give us any thought as to why we we're doing a site plan before the exact?
Yes, because the Board of Selectmen requested, or my recollection of the discussion was that they demanded ZBA, and I think there was a reasonable demand, ZBA and Planning Board approval prior to entering into a lease agreement, because they wanted to ensure that they were, approving a site that was compliant. And I think that was the direction that I heard. And I'm not going to deny that it's a bit uncomfortable to go through the process this way. It does, in some senses, feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. And I think the entire time I've been concerned that modifications will be made, whether through the building permit or through the lease process, that may impact the site. But my feeling is that the applicant has accepted the risk that if modifications are made, they may have to return to this board for further review. So I think they're accepting some of the risk of potentially presenting an imperfect plan and taking on some risk. So I think that's the reason for the order that we're doing things in. I don't think it's ideal, but I also don't think that the board is required to have a lease in front of it. Recognizing fully, though, that some elements of the lease may define how things are done, whether it's snow removal or, even some of the configurations that are on the site. It's just sort of the product that we have in front of us based on the requirements that have been put in place by the town.
Kathy?
Okay, yes, go ahead, Randy.
Yes, I'd just like to ask Matt and Brad, my discussions with Dave at the site regarding the future layout of Railroad Ave, Brad, I understand the process, and I understand now it's an easement over the Beam property connected by town-owned property, fee title property. But I would like to maybe put some of the fears at rest with that, insofar as there's a 20-foot traveled way in there that doesn't have hardly any wiggle room to go either way. And that's why my discussions with Dave settled on where that edge of pavement or traveled way is towards the building. If you look at the plan, you can see that 20 feet on the other side is the back edge of the parking spaces that already exist in the condominium parking lot. So what I'm trying to say is the center line of that traveled way, and 10 feet either side, or however the town chooses to lay out the center line of Railroad Ave for the future, there's really not wiggle room in how they can change that versus what this plan shows. Maybe 6 inches, maybe 4 inches or something, survey wise, but generally the center of that traveled way is going to be where it is now. Do you concur with that, Brad?
I do. I think one of the issues is that it's just necessarily right now. It's not laid out and finalized. The lines aren't there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it has to be in that slot right there, because there is, as you said, there's no wiggle room at all in there. Plus, coming around the corner of the building there and along the side of it on the west side there. it's gonna fill up that entire space basically, with the exception of probably a small strip there for, for a planter or, little decoration along the face, the side of the museum there, so.
Yeah, and we used a distance that Dave wanted, which I believe was, without looking at the plan, 4 feet from the drip edge, from the edge of the drip edge that's proposed for the drainage of the building. 4 feet from the EP, that gives us the 20-foot width in there. And the only thing I can think of is maybe they slide that in 6 inches or something closer to the building. But other than that, it's generally, the edge of the travel way is going to be generally where that's shown. And as far as the parking and the clumsy ADA, I normally agree with Mike, but in this case, I think it's the absolute best we could do given all the parameters, whether they be L-chip, the Bridge Falls path, the oddity in the whole situation. I realize there's a few things to work out that are out of my control between the lessee and the town and so forth. I just hope that the board can see their way through to condition those sufficiently.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairwoman, I don't remember another application that is quite so filled with imponderables, uncertainties, and conditions that haven't even really been settled in our minds yet. We hear snow removal is partially going to be the responsibility of the town because the lease is going to be only for the building, not for the lot. Yet the applicant, in this case, Mr. Sims's Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum, cannot commit the Board of Selectmen or the Department of Public Works to snow storage removal to perfect this application because he's not a member of the town. Yet we're expected to accept the suggestion that the town will take care of the necessary snow removal problem. Yet we have no official here from the town who was willing or able to say that. We have an operation or a project which is going into one building, one small part of Railroad Avenue, yet we're planning on thinking about laying out Railroad Avenue in the most useful and efficient fashion that we can. It seems that the cart is really before the horse. The tail is wagging the dog here. I won't go on any further. This application troubles me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I guess from my point of view, what Vaughn suggested is a series of conditions which that we approve this. And then the question is, what conditions are really needed to make sure that it really works? And it seems like there are a number of them. Matt may be able to explain what they might be, but in some ways, I'm very sympathetic to Mike's position. At the same time, to me, this is a project which has real value to the town, so it may be that we should try to work out some way to deal with it. But I think it's an issue that we really don't know all the variables.
Okay, Peter, would you be willing to make a motion?
I don't know what conditions we would put on, so I wouldn't know what to add to the motion.
If you're talking about approving the application, Matt does conditions, and we could have him go through those and then discuss those. Is that okay with the board members? Okay, Matt,
I would, okay, therefore I will make a motion to approve this application with appropriate conditions set forth by Matt Sullivan.
Oh, okay, which we're going to go over right now.
Could I ask a
Correct.
question before the motion?
Okay, well, I'm trying to get a sense
I know.
where people want to go. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. And now I have an indication, but go ahead.
Well, I'm hearing a lot about many outstanding issues, and I want to make sure I understand what those are. So if we're going to craft additional conditions, I can try and do that. One of them is snow storage, but as far as I'm hearing, it's the responsibility of snow storage, not the mechanism of it. And I would just say for the record, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I can think of no example where the planning board has required specific information about what entity will be responsible for disposing of snow, whether it be the private property owner or the contractor.
Madam Chair,
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
snow storage, on every application that we've heard, Mr. Planner, snow storage has always been at the requirement of the application's fulfillment and has always been a responsibility of the applicant. And in this case, we've heard snow storage will be a responsibility of someone other than the applicant. I mean,
Yeah,
where am I
Mike,
supposed to go there?
Yep, that's fair. That's a fair point.
It's like me saying that my neighbor is going to shovel my driveway. I mean, I can't commit him, and Mr. Sims cannot commit the town.
Okay, Matt, do you want,
Well, can I just, so are there any other substantive issues that need to be addressed? I heard code compliance, but I feel that that's addressed through the materials in the application.
And then the construction agreement determination?
As far as a construction observation agreement or an actual internal building permit related construction agreement?
Well, there are elements that are on the exterior of this building that there must have an agreement with the town to build ramps and entrances.
Yeah, so the board has one of two options. You can require some sort of security be required for external improvements. I would just note, though, that it would be highly unusual for the planning board to require security for improvements that are not related to site work.
okay, all right, go ahead, Mike.
Madam Chairwoman, I think Matt's condition regarding architectural design standards on page 4 of his planner review should take care of that concern. All we need is a confirmation from the applicant, who in my opinion should be the town, but nonetheless, the applicant should confirm there are no exterior modifications. If we have that confirmation in whatever form the planner feels is appropriate, I think that concern for alterations to the exterior of the building should be covered.
And when I said exterior modifications, what I was referring to is, dimensional expansions. I mean, clearly there's going to be painting done. There's going to be some, there's going to be refurbishing and renovation work. I'm assuming that is all acceptable to the board, correct?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. What I was getting at here is exactly what you're saying, Mike. I just want to make sure that this approval didn't include with it any kind of dimensional expansion, with the exception of the ramp, obviously, and the area that will hold the HVAC equipment that's shown on the side of the site, which I believe is included here.
Okay, can
So-
that phrase that you have in your planner review be in the as a condition? Make sure that it's all clear to everyone that there are no exterior modifications to the exterior of the building with the exception of the steps, lighting, ramp, AC, and trash area.
In accordance with the ZBA, I would also request the board add in signage to that. Obviously, the applicant is able to request a sign permit, and the ZBA did acknowledge that. So I would just add in signage.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't you go through the conditions that you're proposing, Matt?
Okay, so condition number 1 is the incorporation of the plans as amended to the date of this approval. One amendment I would make specifically is amending plan number 1 to reflect the revised date of 6/4/2020 rather than the plan date that's reflected there. But those 4 plans would be incorporated as part of the approval. And please note that this does not include any interior configuration plans, as I feel that those will be resolved through the building permitting process. Condition 2, the applicant shall be responsible for payment of all recording fees to the Carroll County Registry of Deeds prior to the signature of the plans, that being the notice of decision. Condition 3, all the documentation submitted with the application within the application package is incorporated as part of this approval. All the final plans shall be stamped by a licensed land surveyor, landscape architect, wetland scientist, and professional engineer as applicable to the plans presented in this case. Condition 5, a letter of compliance with ADA for external site elements shall be submitted prior to the signature of the plan by the board. Condition 6, the applicant shall revise the parking requirement calculations to reflect the total square footage of the finished museum. And Randy and I have talked about that specific condition. Condition 7, the applicant or town shall secure an access easement or complete a boundary line adjustment with tax map 21744 prior to a certificate of occupancy to ensure that pedestrian access is possible. This specifically references what we would assume would be pedestrian encroachment on the existing Bean property as a result of the ramp's location. Obviously, the current owner of the property is willing to negotiate this with us, but it's unlikely that we will reach agreement on a final security of that access by the time that this is approved.
Okay,
But we would.
Boundary line adjustments, so everybody's clear, needs to come back to us. Okay.
And who will be the agent when it comes back to us? Will it be the Lakes Regional Museum or will it be the town?
It would be the town.
Then why isn't the town here in front of us tonight?
Because the town needs to adjust a boundary line with another private property owner, and it cannot do so at this time, that being the Bean Trust.
Understood.
Okay. Can
That's
we
why I
put
won't
that
belabor the
in-
point.
Okay, sorry. Can we put that as a condition when the town isn't here to even comment on that? I mean,
Kathy, I'm sorry,
kind
you cut out, I'm
Well,
sorry.
Okay, well, I'm concerned about saying the applicant / town shall secure. I mean, now we're bringing, as Mike is saying, another party into this who has really not been a party to the application. I mean, I'm concerned about that condition.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I just make a quick comment here? We have a couple things that the town is going to be involved with coming up. I think it is next number 8 here, which is going to be the layout of Railroad Ave is one of the conditions that's going to obviously involve the town.
Yeah.
I agree. We're talking, the difference here, I think, is we've been talking about all night, is that the museum building is being leased to the Railroad Museum, and they're acting as the agent along with Randy on that part of it with the ramp and everything.
Okay,
So the layout of the roadway will be the town, and also the decision on how we do the snow removal on Bridge Falls Path is going to be a town involvement, as would be the boundary line adjustment. So we got 3 things there that will be bringing the town involved.
yeah, okay.
When it comes to.
Kathy,
Yeah.
quick insert for Matt, in case you guys do the conditions. The revision date is down below the title block under revisions is 6/4/20, the updated revision date, Matt. It's already on the plan.
Yep.
And a quick clarification of the parking requirements. I did change them to the use of the building, the part of the building that was for public use. Remember, we went over that. Do you want it changed back to the full capacity of 10? Because we have the off-street parking, so it's not an issue one way or another. That's just a point of clarification.
Randy, I think the ordinance calls for the public use of the space,
Yeah.
if my memory serves me correctly. So I would maintain what you have on there, and therefore I think that condition number 6 can be removed from the proposed plan conditions. And Kathy, I think what would actually clarify your concern, and maybe it doesn't, but I agree that removing the applicant and from number 7 or what is now number 6 probably makes sense.
Yeah.
It would not be the museum in any circumstance, in my opinion, that would be
Okay.
completing the boundary line adjustment or an access agreement. So I apologize for a bit of an error there on my part. It really should be the town only.
Okay, all right.
And thanks, Brad, for kind of leading my head to that point. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. Okay, so you have gotten to condition 8.
Condition number 8, which will become condition 7, is that this approval shall be conditional upon the completion of proposed improvements to and layout of Railroad Avenue by the town of Wolfeboro. And incorporated into that is a no certificate of occupancy shall be granted for the museum use until those improvements are completed. That really gets to the fact that many of the improvements required to access the museum safely and securely are related to the Railroad Avenue layout.
Okay, can we add
Condition-
ZBA? Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
ZBA in their conditions, I think should be added in here.
Sure. So let's add condition number, it would actually be condition number 8, and it would be all of the conditions contained within the ZBA approval for case number, apologize,
Okay, case number.
09 SE 20 shall be incorporated as part of this approval, and that would be condition number 8.
Okay,
Does
and
that
then the exterior modifications.
Does that additional condition include, I beg your pardon, the 2-year time limit on the exercise of the special exception?
It doesn't incorporate it. It doesn't add it to this, Mike, directly, I don't think, but I would say that the special exception definitely includes the 2-year requirement. But I don't think that adding it here imposes an additional requirement for timing. Am I answering your question?
Kind of. Let me ask it in a different way.
Okay.
Can this board impose a time limit on site plan review?
Yes, you can under statute, but typically the board defaults to the 5-year exemption.
Well, then I would like to propose condition number 8, that the board impose a 2-year time limit on the exercise of the site plan review approval in conjunction with the 2-year time limit imposed by the ZBA for the exercise of the special exception, so that the clocks on both applications run at the same time.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay, Matt,
That seems reasonable.
okay, let's see, can we put in a condition that the parking spaces on the property are to remain public parking spaces? Because that's what was said earlier.
I think they always are and will be. It's a town property.
Well, I think that needs to be clear. I agree, Vaughn, but.
It doesn't hurt to include it, Madam Woman.
Right. Matt, are you about to say something?
I'm not sure that is the planning board's jurisdiction. And I'm not trying to create problems, but it is the Board of Selectmen have authority over this piece of town property. And I'm just concerned that by requiring the spaces to I guess what I'm getting at here is that I think that the Board of Selectmen could enter into some sort of lease agreement technically, and I'm just not sure that the planning board has the authority to go above and beyond a public property in a binding way and require that. I'm not sure, Kathy, so I'm sorry. I just don't know. And you're welcome to add it as a condition. I just don't know how enforceable it is.
Okay, well, it was testified that they're going to be public parking spaces, so it's been stated here this evening. And I think it's important that we maintain our public parking spaces.
If it's unenforceable, we lose nothing. Correct?
Well, and the Board of Selectmen get to decide. They're the ones coming into agreement with the
Good.
museum.
Right, that's all I'm getting at, that I think if the board decided that they wanted to dedicate 2 spaces to museum staff, I think technically they could do that. So I just want the board to understand that I think they have that authority. But Mike, to your point, yeah, I see no harm in including it.
Okay.
And
Okay, and then how are we going to deal with the snow storage? We need to address that issue. Since it.
I think that all we can say at this point is that the responsibility for snow storage, or rather snow removal on the subject property shall be resolved prior to, you can either do signature of plans or you could do certificate of occupancy.
So Matt, it's not on the subject property. The part that we're concerned about is on the Bridge Falls path or along it.
Right.
Right, and I don't think that you can impose a condition on that portion, and I know that's odd because this application
Well, then
depends
maybe
upon it.
we shouldn't be including it in the plans, that it shows access to the Bridge Falls path. And now you're saying we can't say anything about it?
It's just not ADA compliant if we don't have any agreement about removal of snow. Let's say there's a
Madam
bus
Chair?
full of children
If
who
it- If this were a private property and the Bridge Falls path were a public sidewalk, and I recognize that's not the case, but if that were the case, the board would be looking at how the pedestrian access on the private property only would be maintained. It would not be looking at whether or not the town at some point in time is going to abandon snow removal responsibility of the public sidewalk. I'm not suggesting that's comparable. I'm just saying that the application clearly needs to demonstrate that there's safe year-round pedestrian access to some extent, but I'm a little worried about adding a condition that relates to a property that isn't technically the subject of the application. I know I'm not giving you clear guidance here, but it concerns me a bit.
Okay, so somebody in a wheelchair arrives in the winter.
Hmm?
Don't we have to make sure they can get to the door?
If the museum is open, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's going to be open year round. And let's say one of the people who likes to work on the models or one of the children in the school buses arrives in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
We can't provide access. We haven't guaranteed it.
Okay, so what I'm going to recommend then is that the board should not sign the plans until there's a formal document to be incorporated as part of the approval documenting the responsibilities of snow storage for both this subject parcel and the adjacent parcel.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's our responsibility to address that through the site plan regulations, so that's what we're here for. Did you put something in about the exterior modifications?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm just trying to get these conditions down. Sorry, Madam Chair.
yeah, okay.
So the language will be very similar to that which I have under the architectural design standards, saying that the applicant should confirm that there will be no exterior modifications to the exterior of the building with the exception of steps, lighting, ramp, AC and trash area, and signage.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, folks? If
I
we,
got one more. I got one more you might want to address, if I could, Kathy. One would be, would we want to put a contingent upon the town in the railroad model railroad museum to execute a lease?
great, yes, thank you.
Good. Because you'd want, obviously, the lease is going to be
Right.
a crucial part of this whole agreement here, so otherwise the project isn't going to happen either, so. There's a way to word that in, Matt.
Yep.
As a business owner, I
Yeah.
would be really, really worried if I didn't have everything written down and agreed upon before everything happens. Because you can get halfway through doing what you're doing and
Right.
the lease can just be lost out the window.
Okay, so,
I think Mr. King should be a little bit worried about that portion, not just trusting. Not that we don't trust each other, but that's too trusting.
okay, so Matt, are you adding that?
Yes.
Keep in mind the distinction between the construction agreement and the lease. The lease has been used rather broadly as covering the next 2 years. The lease will not be effective until the certificate of occupancy is issued, which will occur after all of the construction has completed. The construction agreement is the key document which we have to have in place before we can go ahead. The lease does not need to be negotiated until we're getting closer to the certificate of occupancy. But we do need to have a meeting of the minds, that's clear. And I would be more comfortable with the earlier the lease is negotiated, the better. But it is a lower priority than the construction agreement. And that's the one that we need to have in place before we can begin.
I would think, John, you would have at least a letter of intent that would be filed and signed by both parties, that you intend to lease for X amount or whatever, and that, you know, from the town side saying the same thing, so at least you both have the same playbook open, that you understand what is expected on both ends.
The lease is in progress. The lease is in progress.
Yeah,
This is
and I think as far
this
as
is
the
getting
lease is
beyond the
concerned,
authority of the board.
board agreement.
Cannot hear you, John.
I'm sorry, the discussions with the lease are fairly advanced, and I don't think there are any significant areas of agreement. We just set it aside because of the urgency of getting the construction agreement in place, because that's the one that precedes the effectiveness of the lease. But I think you're absolutely right. We will get the lease done fairly soon, but I don't think we don't want that to be a condition for beginning the construction work.
I don't understand why that should not be. It's the only legal binding measure that the town has with the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum. And where we are doing a site plan approval, we have no leasehold agreement to hold Mr. Sims' feet to the fire, and the town has no protection for its interest in the building.
That's all addressed.
I would not recommend this application. I'm sorry.
Those issues you raised are addressed in the construction agreement, the contraction agreement for the engineering work. Issues such as who will pay for what, when will occur, who has liability, who has insurance, all of these sorts of things, the regular construction contract, those will be governing the relationship between the museum and the town for the next year or two. The lease will not govern any of the relationships. The lease addresses what happens when the building is completed and ready for the railroad to do that. That's the subject of the lease. Not that.
What on
Matt,
earth?
can we have the construction, we need the construction agreement prior to the issue of any building permit, and the lease before a CO or something of that nature?
I think both documents will be in place, I expect, before a building.
Okay.
To get into that process, I have told Mr. Sims that he is not getting a building permit until we have those documents in place. We've had very clear communication about that.
And until we have the lease?
Until we have the construction agreement in place. So to your point, Kathy, I think if we want the lease in place before the CO, I think that's a very reasonable condition.
We already have that as part of the warrant article in 2020. So we're already covered by a warrant article to that effect.
Right,
I think we should make a condition of approval. If you're going to approve this, you should make a condition of approval that we have a construction agreement signed between the town and the museum.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to get to before any work starts.
Yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, the town is liable for whatever's done if Mr. Sims walks away from it.
Okay, and then can we put in that we need the lease by the time the CO is issued, even though we know we're going to have it earlier, or?
Can't hurt.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other conditions, folks? Okay.
Madam
Peter-
Chairman, may I ask a question?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Are there any of these conditions that prevent work from beginning when a building permit is issued?
No. Not
Okay.
that I see. May I review the conditions one last time?
Yes,
please.
Board. Okay. And I'm going to skip the ones that are already in the review, recognizing that we have modified those by taking out number 6 and taking out applicant from the condition following that.
Okay,
What will be added is that the condition of zoning board of adjustment case SE. I'm sorry, I missed the number here. SE 09 SE 20 are incorporated as part of this approval. Condition 9, there shall be a 2-year restriction on the site plan approval in accordance with RSA 674-39 until substantial completion is accomplished. Condition 10, parking spaces on site are to remain public. Condition 11 is the complicated one that I have pieces down of, and that is prior to signature of the plans, a letter shall be added to the file, or ultimately may be another document that formally memorializes the responsibility of snow removal from the site.
Yep.
The 12th condition is that there shall be no exterior modification with the exception of steps, lighting, a ramp, AC and trash area, and signage as permitted by the Town of Wolfeboro zoning ordinance. Condition 13, an execution of the execution of the lease shall be completed prior to the issuance of a CEO for the use. And condition 14, a construction agreement shall be in place prior to the issuance of a building permit.
oh, okay.
And those are all the conditions I had.
Yeah, and condition 7 was the layout of the road. That one was already on your list. Okay,
Yes.
okay. I'm gonna call.
May I make another comment?
Yes, go ahead, John.
In terms of modifications, we are replacing an asbestos tile roof with a shingle roof. We are making a number of these sorts of changes to restore the building back to the way it was. But these don't affect the footprint or the geometry of the building. But we are making these sorts of external changes, and I don't want to be inhibited from using best practices to return the building to the way it was.
I hope I clarified that the renovation related work was allowed, correct? That did not create additional dimensional expansion or something of that nature. Is that correct?
No, it says the applicant should confirm that there are no exterior modifications proposed to the exterior of the building.
But replacement of the roof, you're including in that?
Well, it's not spelled out specifically. How specific do we want to make this?
Yeah.
I would not propose, that's what I was getting at, sort of 2 bins. One bin being renovation work, including trim, paint. Obviously, there's going to be foundation work with the piers there. The roof is going to be redone. There's going to be abatement of certain materials. I view that as something that the planning board is not necessarily concerned about. In opposite, or in the other bin, I would say things that expand outside or really drastically change the appearance of the building. Those are the things that I think are controlled under the condition that I've added, and those things include the addition of the lighting. Clearly, the addition of the ramp will change the look of the building. The steps actually should not be included. The AC and trash area, that's going to be a substantial exterior modification on the other side of the building from the ramp. And obviously there will be a sign placed in the building. But again, I don't think that those renovation related items, I didn't think that the board wanted to necessarily regulate those specifically.
No, I just don't want to run into an issue with somebody saying, hey, wait a minute. You said no exterior modifications and they're working on the roof. So I just want to make sure that doesn't happen.
The condition could be clarified to say,
Right.
No exterior modification with the exception of renovation work related to the existing structure.
We will also.
And even that is broad, but I perhaps that would cover it.
We will be removing the low deck at the north end of the building, which is a modification to the structure.
Yeah, right.
But that's a renovation modification. I think Matt's suggested language works. Any contestation subsequent would have to refer to the minutes of the meeting. And we have had a pretty in-depth discussion of what this board means by exterior modifications as not including matters of renovation, bringing the building back to its original historical condition. So I think we'd be covered there.
Oh, okay.
I think that word renovation fixed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, I'm about to close the public hearing. I closed the public hearing. Okay. Somebody be willing to make a motion, Peter?
I move to accept the application based on the conditions that were stated.
I second that.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Okay, and I need to do a roll call vote. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the application with all of the conditions that were just discussed. Von Dugan,
Yes.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
Mike Hodder,
No,
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Julie Jacobs,
Yes.
and Cassie Barnard. I vote yes. Okay, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, vote of five to 1. Okay, folks, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and for your input. And we can move on now.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Randy and John.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Okay, no action items. Next item is public comment. Any member of the public want to make any comments to the planning board? Now is your opportunity to do that. Okay, I don't see anyone coming forward, so we will move on to other business. We've got the approved Board of Selectmen 2021 to 2030 capital improvement plan goals. So, this information will be forwarded to the CIP, Capital Improvement Programs Committee. And Matt, did you want to make any comments about this information?
Sure. The one comment I'd like to make is I've been having an active discussion with both Kathy and Mike about just some concerns related to what precedent these CIP guidelines set for the capital improvement process. I think one of the things that we've talked about at some level with the planning board in the past is that the Board of Selectmen do play a significant role in our capital program process. And certainly they do set the tone with these guidelines that are specifically for the department heads at the beginning of that process. One of the things that we're talking about doing, though, is really clarifying for this year's committee that the CIP guidelines put forward by the selectmen are for the department heads and are not intended to specifically guide what the outcomes are of the CIP process when it comes to the planning board's role. I think that sometimes those lines are muddied when this is the first document released. Generally, I think that what the CIP has ultimately come up with has aligned pretty well with what the selectmen put forward. But I think we're just sort of having a jurisdictional conversation. Not that there's any conflict at this point in time, but that it would be good to clearly set up what the roles and responsibilities are moving forward. Again, recognizing that nothing has been a significant issue thus far, but just that it is a bit of an odd process when this goes to the department heads prior to them even submitting their CIP forms to the committee.
Okay, and this certainly, it's very clear that these are guidelines for the department heads, and certainly the department heads report, through the town manager to the Board of Selectmen, so. But anyway, we are gonna meet and take a look at all of the information going to CIP, and that then would be forwarded to the planning board, right? Matt? Yes,
That's correct.
okay,
Madam Chairwoman,
yes,
I would suggest that we do not forward this document as presented by the planner to the members of the CIP, that it be redrafted as a document coming from the planning board to the CIP members. There's one, the Board of Selectmen's guidelines for the CIP process are vital. They are not entirely determinative, but they are absolutely essential. They're the only body in town that can directly address departmental heads and set out how they expend their money and on what projects as well. But I notice in the current CIP guideline, and this underlines the differences between the planning board's concerns for CIP and the Board of Selectmen's concerns for the CIP process. In the Selectmen's guidelines, there is no mention of any of the goals outlined in our current adopted master plan. We had a number of recommendations made by citizens in the master plan, none of which are reflected in the Board of Selectmen's guidelines, except in a very general fashion, like keep our roads going. And in addition, the Board of Selectmen presume that certain projects are going to be on the CIP program, approved and recommended rather by the planning board for the 2020-2021 program, but yet we have not discussed them as members of the CIP. And I think they're jumping the gun a little bit there. So rather than just a simple jurisdictional issue, I think it's really a more constructive issue. I think it goes to the heart of the different remits that the planning board and the Board of Selectmen have when it comes to town government. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
okay, all right, thanks, Mike. Okay, any questions on this information?
Can I
Okay.
ask a couple of additional questions?
Sure.
Has the Board of Selectmen chosen their representative to the CIP?
Yes, I have Paul O'Brien.
Then we will need to propose his name for vote by the planning board.
I believe that you may have already done that.
I
Did
thought
we already do that?
Right.
I think you did, Mike. Let me check on that real quick while we're.
Yeah.
While
But
Okay.
Mike, you're right. I'm not sure that we have voted on all the members yet. So I meant to go back through the minutes and clarify that. And I'll do that before the next meeting.
Okay, we also need to get somebody from the budget.
Time is coming up quickly here, so
And
yeah.
we
But
also-
I think Paul O'Brien. I think we did vote on him. Go ahead.
Do we have anybody from Governor Wentworth Regional School District yet?
Yes.
I have some good news, but not fully good news. The item is on the June agenda, I believe they said, for them to actually make a nomination. But I did receive some very positive response from the school district, and they were very thankful to be participating in the process. But I don't have the nomination letter in hand. I did specifically request that it come from the board itself on a letter to the planning board.
And so that's
So they're going,
supposed to
okay,
happen-
we'll cross that when we come to it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Oh, okay. All right, let's see, we forwarded to you email from Ann Blodgett. Did you want to?
Actually, could I just address the CIP appointment item, just because I
I'm
happen to
sorry.
find these minutes?
Sure.
So it was moved by Kathy Barnard. This is on April 21st, 2020. Moved by Kathy Barnard, seconded by Mike Hodder to appoint Paul Whalen, Chuck Sumner, and Suzanne Ryan as the 2020 CIP Committee, and to appoint Paul O'Brien as the Selectman's representative and Linda Murray as an alternate BOS representative to the committee.
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
All right, and it's the Budget Committee that we haven't heard from. And Leanne.
Yes, the Budget Committee has not yet met, but when they do, Leanne has promised on multiple occasions that they will make an appointment.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Did you want to comment about Ann Blodgett's letter? I mean, she did bring up about our ridge lines, and we had talked about that as being something that we may want to look at.
The ridge lines were discussed in the natural resources part of the master plan, and it's something that we were looking into. And
Right.
so therefore it's something that should be considered.
I think that has been on our agenda for some time now, that ridge line. In the last 5 or 6 years, I'm sure it's been on the work list, and I don't think we've resolved it.
Right. Chris Branson and I did quite a bit of research and running around town looking at ridge lines back, gosh, it must have been back in 2011, and brought that to the planning board. The planning board didn't want to deal with it at that time. But there is a model ordinance that the state has put out, and as Peter says, it's on in one of our chapters that we need to look at this. So that probably does need to go on our work plan.
Probably sooner
Agreed.
than later.
Sooner rather than later.
Rather than later, because once those trees are gone, it's 50 years before they come back.
Okay, I can dig that.
Is this something that you'd like to work on in 2020?
I'd like to have a session in which we look at everything on our work program and see where it would fit. We have a lot of pressing issues already.
Well, I have good news on that front, if I could quickly. Finally, things are slowing down a little bit. We actually didn't receive any new applications for the month of July, meaning that Huggins Hospital will be the only application on your agenda for both the July 7th meeting and also the mid-July meeting. So I would really like to circle back to the work plan. There's no question it's gotten abandoned a bit over the past few months based on what's been going on and quite frankly, just the workload, but we are definitely in zoning season. So I would like to bring some level of discussion to that first July meeting and then have a really in-depth work plan meeting at the July 21st meeting as well, if the board is agreeable.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And also I noticed that Linda Murray asked for a list of items in the master plan that the Board of Selectmen are supposed to look at. And we really need to look at our list also, as well as get them out to the Heritage Commission, Conservation, and so we need to work on that.
Kathy, I did respond to Linda this evening, and the context of the conversation was actually the EDC wanted a list of all the tasks that they had been assigned to this morning at their meeting.
Oh, okay.
They had a discussion about the master plan priorities, and they actually identified some specifics that they'd like to move forward on. So I am going to work on that task, sorting by responsible party. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. Kathy, you'll see an email in your inbox, but it's possible. I just need to figure out the mechanics of it. So I will be separating those out by the responsible party.
Okay. All right. Great. And will we have that by the first meeting in July, do you think, or?
I think you'll have that by the first meeting in July. What I'd like to focus on getting to you by the second meeting in July is some very specific direction on the impact fee. I really want to clean that up and have a thorough discussion about how to proceed with that. I did have a somewhat concerning conversation with council about what the steps would be for the planning board to actually remove the impact fee. Not that it's not possible, but I think there's some specific boxes that need to be checked. I'd like to get a detailed memo about what those are back to you so that we can begin those conversations, because I know that the board has clearly said that you'd like to understand whether the fee is still applicable, and if not, get it removed as promptly as possible. And she had some other ideas about how to actually go about doing that rather than removing the ordinance. So I'm going to bring that back to you hopefully for that mid-July meeting as well.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
So I have just one more item that I think we really need to work on, and that is how we address the architectural standards. What's the procedure? How are they reviewed? What are the documents that we should see? We were presented with a building that was shown to us in a slide that was different from a 3D rendering that we had in our pocket. You know, nobody really was too concerned about some of the criteria that we had established. I know everybody wanted to approve that project, but I think that we have to have a real specific method of discussing and addressing these things. Otherwise, it's nonsense.
Vaughn, would you be willing to help me on that?
I would be happy to.
All right, I think I need some assistance, and I would love some help. Happy to meet with you or have a call, because I agree. I'm even struggling with what, just how binding some things are if minor modifications are made. So I'd like to have that conversation with you, because certainly the Gala project was one where I had to actually weigh in on relief that was needed from the regulations. And that was a bit challenging to do. So I could definitely use some assistance if you'd be willing to help me out. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt it's an improvement. Everybody wants it. It's better than it was, but we have standards.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Vaughn, that would be great if you could sit down with Matt.
Yeah,
We
I'll
want to
talk
get
to you
this
tomorrow, Matt.
on the right track.
Okay.
Matt, you had future land planning board meeting locations.
Yes.
Make us happy, Matt. Make us happy.
So I think I can make everybody happy for once. The discussions that I've had, I'm happy to say that in July, on the July 7th meeting, we will offer hybrid meeting access. So you will be allowed to attend the meeting in town hall, barring some catastrophe in the next couple weeks. Mike, you got to find some new exciting things in your life. I'm just kidding.
I'm very important to you, dude. Come on.
No, I'm happy to actually have everybody back. I'm looking forward to it too. So Mike knows I'm just kidding with him. But July 7th, please do plan to, or if you're comfortable, plan to attend the meeting in town hall. We're going to have some protocols in place. I would just plead with my board members here. Please do plan to wear a mask. If not for your benefit, just for the other folks that will be in the audience for the Huggins Hospital case. We're not going to require it, but we are going to ask that you please do that. We'll have all the social distance that's necessary. We'll space the chairs out. It's going to be quite preposterous looking, to be quite honest with you, but it will be effective. We'll have cleaning procedures in place. But what we're also going to do is provide digital access as well, where for folks that aren't comfortable, they can actually participate in the meeting directly in the same way that we're doing this here. I can see that Tim from Community TV is texting me furiously because this is new news to him, and we're going to have to figure out how exactly we actually go about doing it. But we are going to figure it out because I think that we are going to be moving to this hybrid meeting setup moving forward. But again, really focusing on, for folks who aren't comfortable or are vulnerable populations, we want to still give them the same option to participate in the way that they've been doing it thus far, but give the board the ability to communicate in a more traditional manner.
Okay.
So July 7th.
Okay, that's very good news.
Yep.
Any other items? Okay, let me just, when I talked to Julie this afternoon, I told her that she would be sitting in on the Huggins Hospital application. So just for your information, Matt's going to make sure that she has all the information, will be up to speed. And she will sit for me at that meeting. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Two questions. One for Matt. What is the current status of the master plan? When is it going to be published? Has it been published? Are there copies available?
Yep, good question. And Kathy is very happy that you asked too, because she sent me an email on Sunday that she was very worried about it. So the plan is fully revised. I've done that. It's posted online. I've broken out the implementation chapter. I've done all that work. The one thing I haven't done is print it. If only I knew of a print shop that could do that for us. And perhaps I do have one in mind. We just need to get it off to the printer. But I did make the modifications that I had been promising, and it's just a matter of getting it printed. And Julia, of course, I'm kidding on that.
Didn't we already pay for that?
No, we did not pay for the printing. Nope. So I didn't pay for it in the end. I wanted to make some modifications, and we did that. So it just needs to be printed at this point. And it took me way too long to do that, so I apologize. But I know that all the board members need a copy, and I was particularly sensitive to that, handing Julie kind of her, planning board Bible, and I wasn't able to put the master plan into it. So I think I would like to promise. I know I've made promises on this before, but you'll have copies of that by that first July meeting, July 7th.
Okay,
Good.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can commit to doing that because I've done the other work that took me so long.
And Matt, just so you know, Mike Cotter and I do not communicate outside of these meetings.
Of course not.
Right.
One other question, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is the current status of the short-term rentals subcommittee?
Oh, you're making me feel good, Mike. Great.
Wasn't intentional, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I'm here to be on the hot seat. That's all right. So the status is that Kathy would like me to convene the committee, and I've told her that I unfortunately have had too much going on over the last couple of months. But she does want me to convene it, and I will be sending out a notice for that committee very shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
I can't give a better answer than that, but that's the plan.
Soon come is good enough.
Okay, anything else, folks? Okay, then somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn, and then I have to call the roll.
So moved.
Thank
Seconded.
you. A second, okay. All right, Von Dugan,
Aye.
Brad Harriman,
Yes.
Mike Cotter,
Aye.
Peter Goodwin,
Yes.
Julie Jacobs,
Yes.
and Kathy Barnard. I agree with adjourning the meeting, and I thank you all for your patience. And Mary Jane, I hope we haven't scared you away.
All right.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
all.
everyone. Appreciate it.